We're thrilled to have you join us for this discussion. My name is Cindy Valenzuela, and I am the manager of medical device team in Registrar Corp. And I'll be your moderator for today's session. Also, Dr. Marco will be joining with me for our topic in UDI. So this session is being recorded and will be sent out a link. And also please use the Q&A box to submit your questions at any time. We'll address as many as we can during the Q&A at the end of the presentation. So during this session, we'll cover topics including background about our company, of course, the unique device identifier, the GUDID, the Global Unique Device Identifier database, alternatives, exceptions, and exceptions, UDI Worldwide summary, and what Registrar Corp can assist with your establishment. Before we begin to our main topic, let me give you a little background of our company. Registrar Corp is a US-based company that provides regulatory compliance services, software, training for industries regulated with the US Food and Drug Administration. Our services includes medical devices, food and beverages, pharmaceutical, cosmetics. We have the dietary supplements and then the radiation emitting devices. A little bit of background history. Founded in 2003 and headquartered in Hampton, Virginia, Registrar Corp has been supporting over 32,000 clients in more than 190 countries with 18 offices, providing 27 services. Registrar Corp is also an ISO 27001 certified, so we can assure that your data is in good hands. Next, please. Okay, what is FDA? The FDA was established to protect consumers from unsafe food and drugs. It began with the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, signed by President Theodore Roosevelt in 1938. President Franklin Roosevelt signed the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, expanding the FDA's authority to require safety reviews for new drugs and bans false therapeutic claims. Over time, the FDA's responsibilities have grown, and power to regulate certain products were assigned to FDA. Today, FDA regulates the following products: food, drugs, including veterinary drugs, blood products, biologics, and vaccines, cosmetics, medical devices, radiation emitting devices, and tobacco products. A little bit of background with medical device definition for those who are new here, just starting their business and wanted to know about the definition of affect the body's structure or functions, or as long as it does not work primarily through chemical actions or by being metabolized. Now, to discuss our main topic for today, it is my pleasure to introduce my co-presenter, Dr. Marco Theobald, who's been with Registrar Corp for over 16 years. With his length of expertise at the company, Dr. Marco brings exceptional knowledge, hands-on experience, and a strong dedication to his work. Without further ado, Dr. Marco, the floor is yours.
Thank you for that information over the US FDA Unique Device Identifier for medical devices. FDA introduced the UDI in September or on September 24th in 2013. So it's not really a new kind of regulation. It is in place for quite a while now. The regulation at that time required most medical devices to carry a unique device identifier. All devices as defined by 21 USC 21H are subject to the requirements of the UDI rule unless an exemption or alternative has been granted. We will talk about that part specifically a little bit more further down in the presentation because there are really some things that you need to know about these exemptions. The FDA is establishment the unique device identification system to adequately identify devices sold in the US, and that means from manufacturing through distribution to the patient use. The regulatory UDI requirements were implemented in phases based on the class of devices. So FDA started with the highest risk class, class 3, when they came out with the rule in September 2013. 1 year later, all class 3 devices were supposed to have a UDI on the label. And then phased in, we had the class 2 devices first, the ones that are implements or life-sustaining, life-supporting, then the rest of class 2, and then the latest step was class 1 devices, which was September 24, 2022. The key benefits of the UDI system are: one is more accurate reporting of adverse events, also more effective management of device recalls, a more robust post-market surveillance system to support pre-market clearance and approvals, a rapid and precise identification of devices, enhanced analysis of devices on the market, and also supports a secure global distribution chain. And these are only a couple of the benefits. There are more in the background. So how does a UDI look like? What we see here on the screen in the picture is called a GTIN. It's a global trade item number. GTINs are specifically barcodes you get from a provider called GS1. But we will come back to that a little bit later. I just wanted to show you what a UDI looks like. It's a simple barcode that most likely everyone has seen. This is a linear barcode, and the barcode has two parts. You have the lines, which is the machine readable part, and then underneath you see the numbers, which are the human readable part of a UDI, or in that case of that barcode. Also, the barcode is divided in left and right part. So the left part, the red one, is called the device identifier. And the device identifier identifies the device to the model and also your company. So that is also called the fixed part of the UDI, because that stays as it is. On the right-hand part in blue, we have what is called the production identifier. The production identifier can have different information. It could be a lot number, a serial number, or here as a UBD means used by date or an expiration date. And that kind of production identifier is constantly changing and evolving. So that is the big difference between the two parts here. That is more or less a summary of what you have seen before. The device identifier, the production identifier together are the unique device identifier. There are actually a couple of information you can use as a production identifier that is allowed by the rule or by the FDA, which is a lot or a batch number, the serial number, an expiration date, or a date of manufacturing. The last one is a very specific one, and I have only seen a couple of times. It's the distinct identification code for a human cell, tissue, or cellular and tissue-based product regulated specifically as a device. And there are very, very limited cells and tissues that are regulated as a device. So we usually don't see that very often. But these are the 5 different information that you can use to create your production identifier. The production identifier, when it is required, you have to use at least one out of these 5 points. So, for example, if you are want just to use the batch number or the lot number or just your serial number, that is fine. But you can combine them as well with a manufacturing date or an expiration date. That is up to you, what you think makes most sense for you to track your device really from manufacturing over the distribution to the patient use. There are also other kinds of barcodes. I'm not really a barcode expert, but I want to point that out. You have the QR codes. They are more popular in the last couple of years, also known as quick response code. And also another technology possibility is the radio frequency identification, RFID. Um, that is definitely one of the more expensive technology possibilities that you have to use them as a UDI barcode. But also, please keep in mind that makes only sense with when really everyone in your distribution chain can use it and has the technical abilities to use radio frequency for identification. Um, it's more on a also rare end that I'm aware of that companies are using it. It's more really in the business of blood banks. Um, way more popular are really the QR codes. And when you look below the QR code, and there is a reason why I have broken up that lengthy number. If you do not have a lot of space on your label, there is definitely the possibility to break these numbers up and stack them as I have shown it here. There is no requirement in the regulation that tells you you need to have the number all out in one line. So if you have a small label and it might be more convenient for you to break up the human readable part as I have shown here, that is definitely a possibility you can do. A little bit more background on the barcode itself, because we will talk about that under the exemptions later on. There's one barcode type, it's called UPC, that's the Universal Product Code, with usually 12 digits, and it's primarily used here in North America. There are actually also 2 types, it's the UPC-A and the UPC-E. The A has 12 digits, the E is a compressed version, has only 8. There is a counterpart in the European Union. It's called EAN, or European Article Number. However, that is by default 1 digit longer. It has 13 digits. But same thing, you have 2 parts, or two options here. You have a standard, which are the 13 digits, and also a compressed 8-digit for smaller packages. The UDI has usually between 8 and 14 digits, depends on the issuing agency you are working with. We will define what is an issuing agency a little bit later, so please stay by. The format must include both. So when you print the UDI on your label, it needs to be in human readable. This is the number part, and also the machine readable, the barcode, the lines, or the quick read, the square. Both needs to be on the label. There are also more barcode types. There's also one more specific to Asia, but I cannot cover all the different barcode types here. That might also be a little bit too far out of the topic, but just in general, there are different types of barcodes, and you need to know a little bit about what are the differences. There is a standardized system to create unique device identifiers. The UDI barcode is not assigned nor created by the US FDA. The FDA accredits what's called issuing agencies, which are creating the UDI barcodes based on these systems. The issuing agencies develop unique labeler codes for these UDIs under ISO 15459. And the labeler selects the issuing agency that they are working with and where they got these UDIs from. What a labeler is, we will come to that in a minute. Back to the issuing agencies. At that time, FDA has accredited 3 issuing agencies. First one is GS1, and to my knowledge, this is the biggest one. They are using a numeric system only. Then you have the Health Industry Business Communications Council, HIPIC. They use an alphanumeric system. And then you have the International Council for Commonality in Blood Bank Automation. And they are also using an alphanumeric barcode system. So the last one is really very unique, and they are kind of a niche provider because they are really concentrating on everything that has to do with blood banking automation. So if you, for example, you are manufacturer of, let's say, band-aids or a very simple medical device, they might not take you as a client and create UDIs for you. They might most likely refer you to one of the other 2 agencies that FDA has accredited. That information came out on a personal meeting with a person from ICBA, and they really like to stay in that area with blood banking and not really going into commercial UDIs that are used in a retail environment or something like that. Our next point is really who is responsible for the UDI, and FDA has that term, the labeler is responsible for UDI and GUDID compliance. FDA defines the labeler as the person who causes a label to be applied to a device or who causes the label to be modified with the intent that the device will be introduced into interstate commerce without any subsequent replacement or modification of the label. That definition is really kind of a very technical one and not so easy to understand. In most instances, the labeler is really a device manufacturer, but the labeler might be also a specification developer, a single-use device reprocessor, a convenience kit assembler, a repackager, a relabeler, or a private label distributor. What makes you the labeler? To give you a better idea, if your company name is on the label and if I would go, let's say, into a real retail store and would buy your device, and I would see a brand name and a company that is associated with that product, that should be usually the labeler and the responsible party for the UDI. If there are two companies named on a label or three, we have seen over the years different possibilities, then you have really to figure out which party will be the labeler and will take over the responsibility to comply with the UDI. But I would say in over 90% on labels that we have seen, there's only one company name on it, and that makes you usually the labeler and responsible for that regulation. Also important to know, not a labeler. In addition of the name of or contact information for a person who distributes the device without making any changes to the label is not a modification for the purpose of determining whether a person is a labeler. That means you are getting a device for distribution here in the US, and you add a small sticker with your company name and your phone number or address as a contact information, that a buyer can reach out to you and order more of these devices, or if they need service for a device, or might have even an issue or a question about the device. That is not labeling, because you are not really changing the information. They still know who is um, the most likely the manufacturer of the device, and who is really making the device. You are not modifying the complete label. You just put a little sticker as contact, as distributor, and that's it. So in that case, you are definitely not a labeler, and that means you don't have to worry about the UDI and the GUDID that would rely, or that burden, on your business partner. So where is the UDI to be placed? I already said it goes on the label. The UDI is placed on the device label or device packaging. And if the device is intended to be used more than once and reprocessed between users, then it has to go on the device itself. Also a little bit complicated wording here, but to give you a simple example, so every instrument, surgical instrument, that would fall under reprocessing and should have a mark with a UDI on the device itself. The UDI is applied to the base package as well as higher levels of the packaging. So multiple UDIs for the same device or model might be required based on the packaging levels. And that is usually applies to kinds of consumables, like we are talking about band-aids, or maybe other devices like catheters, where hospitals are really ordering bigger packages with 100 or 150, 200, something like that. Place the UDI in human readable plain text and machine readable AIDC, automatic identification and data capture, on the label and packaging, and for certain devices on the device itself. Direct marking is for devices intended to be used more than once and reprocessed before each use. Direct marking can be in easily readable plain text, or in a machine readable part, or any alternative technology that will provide the UDI of the device on demand. So if it comes down to direct marking, you have a choice here. You can use the machine readable part or the human readable part. One is enough. Going back to what's called reprocessing by the FDA. So FDA defines reprocessing of medical devices as the process of cleaning, disinfecting, and sterilization used medical devices so they can be safely reused on another patient. And every kind of contamination, such as blood, tissue, any kind of biologic material, should be removed during that process. There are guidance documents, but I want to give you a simple example as well. So if you have, let's say, a thermometer that you can clean with an alcohol wipe for the next use, that is not what FDA is really or defining as reprocessing. That's a cleaning of a medical device, and that wouldn't require that UDI to be on the device itself. So that thermometer would be still good with to have the UDI on the label, on the packaging, but not on the device itself. But going back, as I said at the beginning, if you have any kind of a surgical instrument, like a hook, like a plier, like a scalpel, and that is reused on another patient and it's going through a high intense sterilization, disinfecting process, that is reprocessing. So how many UDIs are required? Baseline is per model 1. So you have different models, you assign 1 UDI per model. If you have several models of a medical device, the FDA requires that each model must have its own unique device identifier as part of the UDI. Each device label and package must include a UDI in both human readable and machine readable, e.g. barcode form. If the device is intended for multiple uses and is reprocessed before each use, the UDI must also be directly marked on the device itself. Now, each level of packaging, individual unit, box of 10, case of 100, just as an example, must have its own UDI as each is considered a distinct packaging configuration. I have an example here. You have a catheter, and on the left-hand side, you have the base package. And as an example here, FDA said the primary DI is 1001, and then you package that base package because one catheter is not really enough for hospitals. They buy in bigger quantities. So you have two kind of packaging types, 2001 and 2002, which the blue one has a unit of 30 base packages, means 30 catheters, and the other 50. And as I said, even that might be for a bigger hospital not enough, or for hospital chain. So you have an additional one, a bigger box where you place 12 boxes of the 30 units in, and that package DI would be 3001. So in that case, you would really create 4 UDI numbers. But depending on the product you have and how you package it and how many models you have, the numbers can add up very quickly. A shipping container does not require a UDI barcode. So if you box, let's say, 2 packages only of your former example, box, the blue box with 30 catheters, into another box, and you send out these total of 60 to an order of one of your clients, that is a shipping box or shipping container, and you do not need to create that. The big difference, to give you an idea here, is if you have an order number for that, a catalog number, then most likely that is a packaging size that needs a UDI. But if you put a couple of these boxes together on a pallet or in a bigger box, and just to get to the number that your business partner is requesting from you, that is a shipping container, and or you can call it as a shipping container, and that does not need an own UDI. Just to give you an idea how quick these numbers can explode, I made up an example here. A non-surgical gown FDA product code is OEA. And let's say you manufacture these gowns in 5 different sizes: small, medium, large, extra large, and extra, extra large. Then you have different colors: white, blue, purple, green. You make 2 styles, one with a pocket, one without pockets. And you would maybe also have different kind of materials for that gown, let's say cotton, polyester, crepe paper, just for an example. That roughly gives you an idea of 120 UDI barcodes that you would need to create, because every combination on that is 120. So you have the small ones in white and blue, with pocket, without pocket, the different materials. The question is if you really would produce all these different models, but if you do that, then you really end up very quick with high numbers of barcodes that might be, or UDIs that might be required to really create. And we have not talked about now the packaging sizes. So in that example, I just said you are packaging always 5 or 10, means you have 2 packaging sizes. With all the variations, you end up with a total of 360 UDIs. As I said, there might not be really your best seller to have the XXL in every color, in every style, in every kind of material. But if you would do that, it explodes. And then we do not have talked about different packaging variations on top of that, where you have maybe different sizes or different colors in the packaging. So if that would be, let's say you have a package for the small size, but you are putting in that 2 white, 1 blue, 1 purple, 1 green, and that gets an own order number and it's ready to ship out, that would be another UDI that you need to create for that as well. So I just wanted to give you an idea how quick that can explode, and there might be some thinking in the background before you really start with the creation of your UDIs, and also what is feasible. It's not only the regulation on one hand, but we are looking more out of the regulation here at the moment. There's also the business part where you might say, no, we don't do all these models, all these colors, and we reduce that, we shrink that. That was now the UDI itself. There's another thing that's called GUDID, the Global Unique Device Identification Database. So you are not done with having that barcode created and put it on the label, or in some cases, even on the device itself. You have to provide FDA with that data, and that data is collected in the GUDID. So the GUDID is managed with the National Library of Medicine and the FDA in collaboration. And it is a public database since May 2015. It came out for the public use a little bit later than the really regulation came out. They wanted to wait till there is a certain amount on data and then make that really public. There is no registration or account needed if you want to search in the GUDID database, in the public one. Accounts are only required to upload data into that system. There's also no identifying patient information in the database. That is actually a screenshot. When you go to the GUDID, that is what you will see. And then you can enter a device identifier or the UDI. You can enter a company name. There are different search options, and then you will get the results. So you can see your entries public there. Going back a little bit is, as I said before, for submitting the information into that database, you need an account. And that account is created by the FDA. So you have to apply for that account. That's a big difference to what you might use to the first system when you did the registration of your company and maybe listing your products. You could do that anytime over the web. You don't have to wait for FDA to create an account for you. That is different with GUDID. You have to send in an application. FDA is looking and making sure everything is okay, and then they will create and give you access to the database so that you can submit information to the database. Very important for that one is also Duns and Bradstreet. You need a Duns number. If your company has the appropriate Duns number, verify that the information in Dun and Bradstreet is correct, or if it needs any kind of updates, because when you send in the application, FDA is double checking in the Duns and Bradstreet database. And let's say this is old information. You have moved meanwhile. The street address is not correct anymore. Correct that upfront so that FDA has correct and current information. So it's very important that you check that upfront. For information on the DUNS number, refer to section 3A1 of the GUDID guidance. If your company does not have one, means a DUNS number, you can obtain one for free of charge from Dun and Bradstreet. That can take up to 30 business days, so plan accordingly. There's also an expedite options if you really need a DUNS number very fast. However, there is a fee by Dun and Bradstreet to assign you an expedited number. Now, the next step is how to submit data. Actually, there are two options. There is a web application. This is like you open that, or you have your account, and then you can log in. You can use the web application in your browser, and then you can manually um, do the data entry using the GUDID web application. There is one entry at a time or one device at a time. It's quick and easy database access, and it's for really, I would not even say only small submissions, because the other option, the HL7 SPL submission, is pretty tough. You need a lot of knowledge in the background if you want to establish that in your company. And it's really only for high volumes. So if you do not have constantly over the years, let's say hundreds of new UDIs that you need to submit in a year, I have my doubts that HL7 is really the format that you want to go with. So on a conference call, FDA said if you do not have really over 1,000 or 1,500 UDIs per year, they would not recommend you to go through the hassle with the HL7 submissions, because it is really not that easy to install it. And there's also a validation process that you have to go through before you can do your first submissions. So that is a way more lengthy process in comparison to the web application. That is a fictitious medical device label from the FDA webpage. And FDA likes to encourage companies to provide all label information in a submission to the GUDID. However, not all label information might be required as mandatory to pass the validation process for a device dataset on your submission. There are mandatory and voluntary data fields. The device label itself is not part of the submission. So the label is not submitted to GUDID, as I said. The PI portion of the UDI, remember, that is the one where you use your batch number, your serial number, manufacturing date, is also not submitted, the data itself, to the FDA. This hard data or the detailed information stays at your place, at your establishment. You only indicate in the submission or in the database what information is in the PI part. So there is actually a checkbox, and you would check, hey, we are using the lot number, or we are using the manufacturing date. But the real data for a batch or what the number is, that stays at your place. It's not submitted to the FDA. When a GUDID attribute appears on a medical device packaging label, the value submitted to the GUDID should match the value on the label. And also maintain, update GUDID information, keep data current. For example, an end of distribution date. So one model you do not longer really make, produce, manufacture, please, that is what FDA encourages you to. Let FDA know, put an end of distribution date on that particular entry in the database. That is how it looks when you go into the web application and you see the little small red dots behind the primary DI number, the device count. That indicates a mandatory field. For example, a catalog number is a voluntary information. You don't have to provide that. But you need definitely the brand name. It's a mandatory information. On the other hand, a device description, you can put in a description of your device. For example, the exact size of a bandage that you are manufacturing. Or we are talking about a kit, you could maybe list all the ingredients, or maybe not ingredients, but the different devices that you have in a kit. Let's talk about a first aid kit. You really lay out the complete content of that first aid kit in a device description. But that is voluntary. You do not have to do that. And then you see the commercial distribution, the DI record publish date, and then the commercial distribution end date. So there are a lot of fields. It's close to 60 fields, data fields, that is per model that you can fill out, as we see here. Also, mandatory field, you have to identify if you have a 510K exempt or a 510K cleared device, then you have to provide the 510K clearance, or even class 3, where we have pre-market approval. You have to enter your approval number there. You have also to provide the FDA product code, the FDA listing number, and then we have another thing here. It's called the GMDN, the Global Medical Device Nomenclature. Also, that is a mandatory field. So what is the GMDN, the Global Medical Device Nomenclature Agency? Is a leading global standard for the naming and classification of, and also categorization of medical devices. Anyone can register for free as a member and to access the web page and use and look for the GMDN terms. The agency is a non-profit organization and registered as a charity, which reports to its board of trustees that represent medical device regulators and the industry. There's a big difference, and I just want to also spend a couple of seconds on that. The FDA product code system is kind of fixed. I will not say FDA does not do updates. They do updates on the product codes and classification, but it's not really on a regular base. It is really only when it's absolutely necessary. And GMDN has the complete opposite approach. So they try always to come up with a new classification, and they do it when you have a new device that has maybe a new technology, has an additional use on a different kind of intended use in the health industry. So it was before only the use was only marketed or a label as you can use it for A. Now it is involved, or you have a new model. Now it is also doing B. Then GMDN is most likely creating a new classification and a new category for it, where FDA would go with what is really the main intended use, and you would say the main intended use is still A, it's not B. You can use it as B, but the main intended use is still A. So FDA would still put it under the old classification and put your product under that old kind of product code. They would not create a new product code and add a new product code to the system just because you have involved product here. Yeah, this is also going back to the database and how you can see the different fields here. For example, a single-use device, and you see these check boxes. If you click on the arrows, they will expand, and then you would say single-use, yes, no. Or for the production identifier, we talked about that before, it will open and you would just indicate we use the batch number or lot number, yes or no. So this is actually all the mandatory fields listed out here in the GUDID. It starts with the issuing agency, the primary DI code, the device count, the brand name. All these fields that you see here are required with information, at least a single yes or no. And some, as you see, some of these fields are here in red, and the red ones are the critical ones when it comes down to what we call a UDI trigger. So when you, for example, change the brand name, then for the new brand name, you need also a new UDI barcode. For FDA, it will not be the same model anymore, any longer. So you need a new UDI. You create that, you put the device out of the market, and you do a new entry in the GUDID database. So the red ones are, as I said, called the new UDI triggers or changes on that one. Definitely, it's not kind of an update in the system. With these changes, you should provide FDA with a new UDI. Now we have a really interesting part, which is the alternatives, exemptions, and exemptions expired and current. So there was in the past a possibility to use an NDC or an NHRIC number on devices. That was most likely for reimbursement with insurance, pharmacy systems, and you can not longer use these numbers. As of September 24, 2023, the FDA no longer permits the use of these legacy NDC NHRIC numbers on device labels. You have to use, going forward, the UDI system and the UDI number. Since that was out for years, things are changing constantly in the regulatory world, and that is one of the big changes. There was also an alternative which ended on September 24, 2023, and that was given to devices that were sold exclusively in retail, means in a pharmacy here in the US, like Walgreens, like CVS, Rite Aid. And that came out on issues with the systems they had in place to read the UDI barcode. Remember when we talked about the barcodes, we have here in our retail environment the UPC codes, and these codes are shorter. So a lot of the systems out there couldn't read a UDI code. It would give just an error. And this is why FDA for the retail environment given was given an extended time to use UDIs so that companies could do a technical upgrade and maybe use only one barcode on a package instead on having two, which is confusing and not really nice when you're going to the cashier and they have two barcodes and get confused what is the right one and have all these error messages. Anyway, also that alternative is taken off the table. And I don't know if we have any companies here that are dealing with soft contact lenses. However, that industry is more or less given an exemption with no end date inside at the moment. So FDA will reach out to these industries and companies when they have figured out a better way. Background is that the soft lens industry has an own coding system, a little bit similar to the UDI that they are using. And there's at the moment still not really clear what is the best to combine these two systems and how to do that. So FDA has not really made any progress on that. And as I said, that exemption is still in place, and FDA will notify all the companies that they are aware of and reaching out to the soft contact lens industry at a point when there is a change. At the moment, there's no change, and you still are good to go with your industry system. Now we are coming to the general exceptions and exemptions. So there's actually a lot, and that makes the whole UDI not really more easy. It makes it more complicated, and you have to look into what device I'm really working with and what applies to my device. So as an example, class 1 devices do not need to include a production identifier in their UDIs. Okay, so that means the production identifier is only for class 3 and class 2. I have a class 1, I don't need a production identifier. However, if you want to add a production identifier for your class 1, you can do that, but you don't have to. Regulation does not force you to do it. Class 1 GMP exempt devices, GMP, Good Manufacturing Practice, does not require to have a UDI. So we have only in class 1 GMP exempt devices. There are no GMP exempt devices in class 2 and 3. So double check if you get lucky, your class 1 device is GMP exempt. You don't have to comply with the UDI regulation. To give you an example, a manual toothbrush here in the US is a medical device, but it is GMP exempt. So if you're dealing with that, you are off the hook with the UDI. If you make other class 1 devices that would require the UDI, then you only have to take care of these devices, but your toothbrushes are out of the picture. You're good with that. Devices used solely for research, teaching, or chemical analysis and not intended for clinical use. No UDI. Class 1 devices that bear a Universal Product Code, UPC, are deemed to meet all UDI labeling requirements. So that is going back to the first point we had. The class 1 does not need to have the production identifier, but you have already a UPC code for your class 1. You are on the right track, and that makes things a little bit easier for you. Then we have solely veterinary used devices. You don't need UDI or GUDID requirements. You are good to go. There is no requirement for veterinary devices only. If you have a device that you are marketing and labeling for human and veterinary use, yes, you have to comply with the GUDID and also the UDI regulations. Devices intended for export only, that applies only to US manufacturers. So if you export the device and it's not for the US market in any way, then you don't have to comply with UDI and GUDID. Also, custom devices and investigational devices are not required to have UDIs. Single-use devices distributed together in a single package, not intended for individual commercial distribution. You do not need to put a UDI on every single device. The package is enough. For example, you would have a package of scalpels, 100 scalpels, a single-use one, and you put one UDI on the package, that is fine. However, please, we talked about that. Think about you have also to assign a UDI to the base package, but you don't have to print it on every single scalpel. And then we have at least, but not last, not least, exception for shipping containers. This rule does not require UDI to be placed on any shipping container. However, there is another kind of exception we need to talk about, and it gets more and more complicated. There is a general exception for what's called consumer health products. And FDA came up with that to not overwhelm the GUDID database. There are certain consumer health products that still need a UDI on the label and the packaging, but you do not report or submit that data to the GUDID. So the FDA does not intend to enforce GUDID submission requirements for Class 1 devices considered to be consumer health products, even if they are required to bear a UDI on their label and packaging. Consumer health product, what is that? Means a 510K exempt Class 1 device. So if you have a Class 1, and there's a couple of Class 1 that really require a 510K, then that is not a consumer health product. One example on a 510K would be gloves. It's a Class 1, gloves are Class 1 device, but they need a 510K. So it requires the submission of data into the GUDID that are sold directly to consumers over the counter in brick and mortar and or online stores, and that do not fall within one or more of the following categories. When we talked about already the Class 1, so if you have a 510K Class 1, then you need to feed the GUDID database. There's also restricted devices, for example, in vitro diagnostic devices, then Class 1 implemental devices, Class 1 life supporting or life sustaining devices, There's not that many in the database, but if your device falls under that, then it's definitely not a consumer health product, and you have to submit your UDI data, including the product information, to the GUDID. And also, last but not least, certain devices distributed to professional healthcare facilities and intended for use by healthcare professionals only. So if that is the case, then you have not only to put the UDI on the label, you have to submit data to FDA. Very quick, does software need to be labeled with a UDI? Yes, all standalone software, and standalone is kind of an older term that FDA was using, whether packaged or unpackaged, downloadable, must provide its UDI through either or both of the following: an easily readable plain text statement displayed whenever the software started, an easy readable plain text statement displayed through a menu comment. Standalone software that is distributed in packaged form, which is really rare today, is subject to the same UDI labeling requirements as any other medical device. The device label and device package must bear the UDI in plain text and in a IDC format. A standalone software that is distributed in both packaged and not packaged form may be identified with the same UDI. Standalone software that is not distributed in package form must convene the version number in its production identifier. As I said, there is a new definition. The standalone software is an older FDA term. Now there is a new term, software intended to be used for one or more medical purposes that perform these purposes without being part of a hardware medical device. And that means if you have, for example, an injection pump and you have software that is regulating the pump, that software is part of the hardware and is not, for me, the old term is a little bit more clear here, standalone software. Then that is a different point. So standalone software is usually something that you use on a computer, on a tablet, or something else, and that you would use to look into patient data, and based on that data, maybe a treatment or a procedure would be planned. Also, kind of a tricky topic are convenient kits and trays. There's a definition. A convenience kit is two or more different medical devices packed together for the convenience of the user. So that could be, on one hand, a thing like a first aid kit, or on the other hand, a kit ready that is used for maybe smaller procedures that has everything in it. That could be a convenience kit. Also, a term that FDA is using, packaged together. Packaged together means packed or wrapped or sealed in a single container that is not intended to be unwrapped or unsealed before it is used by an end user. And then the last point, already mentioned, that the medical procedure kit. A medical procedure kit typically consists of one or more medical devices packaged together to facilitate a single surgical or medical procedure. A medical procedure kit may be a convenience kit. There is actually a guidance document with a lot of examples what FDA, in their thinking, would accept as a convenience kit and what they think is not a convenience kit. So individual devices packaged within the immediate container for a convenience kit are exempt from the UDI labeling requirements. So that means you only apply one UDI to the whole kit. You don't have to apply UDIs to every single medical device in that kit. Um, Best example are first aid kits, and they can really reach from maybe 2, 3, 4 medical devices up to maybe 30 or 50 the big professional kits. So if you create these first aid kits, this is a convenience kit, and you apply only one UDI to the finished kit, not to every single device in that kit. Also, not a convenience kit are non-sterile orthopedic device sets. So what does FDA understand on that? A collection of orthopedic devices, implants, and reusable instruments that are all supplied non-sterile. Each of these devices is removed from its packaging to be placed into a sterilization tray for cleaning and sterilization at some point prior to use. This is not a convenience kit per FDA because the devices are not intended to remain packaged together without undergoing sterilization before being used by an end user. By an end user in that case is of course a healthcare professional. Therefore, each device must comply with all applicable UDI labeling, data submission, and direct mark requirements. So, short summary, you need a DUNS number to request the GUDID account to submit data to the FDA. You can do that on two ways, the web application or the HL7. You need to have the GMDN, which is the Global Medical Device Nomenclature Number. You need to have UDIs, so contact one FDA accredited issuing agency, collect all mandatory device information, assign a regulatory contact person. That goes also with creating the GUDID account. Apply for the GUDID account, and then when the account is granted, you get feedback from the FDA, submit information to GUDID, and last but not least, update the label with the UDI. I would like also to close my presentation with UDI Worldwide. We have not really solutions for you right now here at Registrar Corp. But of course, we are aware that UDI becomes really a worldwide challenge for companies. So UDI is already required in the US, South Korea, China, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, and Taiwan. Upcoming UDI requirements very soon, Australia, Brazil, the European Union, and in preparation and not too far down the road as well is the UK, Switzerland, India, and Canada. We are looking into it, what we can take on and provide service with at next. But what we have seen so far from the other countries that requiring UDI or requiring soon, specifically with the EU, is that the data sets are very different. So with talking about comparison between US and EU, if you have all the data sets that the EU is requiring, you have only around 60% what US is having. Also, there are some terms and definitions that are very different, and you need to be very, very careful. It's not one on one, it's a new challenge that you see if you want to go to other markets. So, as I said, we do not have really solutions for you yet, but we are looking to extend our services, and we will definitely let you know as soon as we add other agencies that we can assist you with. And that's all from my end. Back to you, Cindy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marco. Just wanted to go over on the Registrar Corp Medical Device Services. With Registrar Corp, we can assist you with registering your establishment, and we can act as the official correspondent, and the U.S. agent service is also provided for foreign companies. We can create your device listings along with that, and we assist with, of course, the UDI guidance and submit your UDI to the GUDID database. We also provide assistance with detention, and we would like to let you know also that there's going to be another webinar coming up, and this is specifically a topic for detention. We assist with EMDR, so we can submit your report to the ESG Next Gen. We also have the certificate of foreign government. So if you need that specific certificate, that is also covered in our services. Radiation emitting device reporting service. We also assist with label review, and also Comply Hub, a software developed to assist with regulation requirements. If you're not ready to commit with our services, and you have questions that you would like to consult, we have consulting hours. We also assist with drug registration and listing service, as well as Health Canada for Class 1 devices. Okay, I think we've run out of time for Q&A. But Dr. Marco, we have would like to put in 5 minutes for the Q&A.
Yeah, go ahead.
For those that we cannot answer questions, feel free to contact us to the email address or phone number on the screen. And we also have our UDI specialist, Erica, with our to support our Q&A session. Um, let's see. There's a lot of questions that came in, Dr. Marco. Um, but guys, the presentation is recorded, and that will be sent to you guys, provided with a link. Let's see. Question. Is GMD encode mandatory for labeling? Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Marco. GMD encode is not required on physical label of the medical device. However, it
Correct.
is mandatory for UDI submission to the GUDID.
Correct.
Okay.
You don't put that on the label. I'm not sure if there are countries that would require that number on the label, but here in the US, it's not a requirement, but it is required as an information on the submission into the good idea.
There's a question here. Is one UDI DI sufficient in a package where same size with different color, texture, medical devices are packed? Dr. Mark, I think is that in reference to when you submit a UDI, is one UDI submission
Yes,
sufficient?
yes. Depends on how you're understanding the question, but you are right. Yeah.
Another question here. Is COVID test exempted to apply? I'm not sure if I understand the presentation. Is it presentation or PR show the UDI? Not sure if I understand the question. Will the PowerPoint slides recording be available? Yes, that will be sent with you guys along with a link. Dr. Marco, there's another one here you want to answer. When a registered model change device count, can we just change the count or have to register another model number? Or Erica?
That needs a little bit more background information, but when you are talking about a model number change, so for me it sounds on the first hearing that you have really a new model. A new model would require a new UDI. But it is up to you to define what is a new model. So if you make changes to a device, it might not be a new model depending on your company definition or interpretation. So it's a little bit hard to say, and usually it's up to you to make that decision if that is really a new model or just kind of an improvement to the device. If it's definitely a complete new model, then I would suggest to have a new UDI. And I would assume if you just try to do an upgrade, an improvement of your device, and FDA would say no for us per definition or how we look at it, it would be a new model, then they will talk to you.
Let's see. There's one here, Dr. Marco, and I think this would be our last, or
Yeah,
up to
go
you.
ahead.
Is barcode required on devices that are already in production for many years that are sterilized?
Yes, so there was a kind of exception for um, products that were manufactured before the compliance dates that was phased in. So there were a couple of dates like September 24, 2014. So let's say everything that was produced in September before that date was not really required to have a UDI. But all that is gone because now when you do productions, there are no exemptions anymore. Every device that requires a UDI, and we have seen there's a couple of exemptions here, should have the UDI.
And I think I saw a question. It's about the basic UDI. Basic UDI is not used for US FDA regulatory framework. I believe that is specific to the European Union's MDR or EVDR regulation for UDI.
Yeah, if you would please send in that question again, we will take a second look at it and let you know. No problem.
Yeah, I think, and that's it. Thank you all for joining us today. I would love to answer more of your questions. We ran out of time, but please feel free to send us an email with the and the email address on the screen. If you have any further inquiries, question, please send it to us, and we will answer it via email. Again, thank you guys for joining us to our webinar. Please join us again in our next webinar regarding detention. Thank you all.
Thank you. Goodbye.